up, you beautiful bastards? Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show, you daily dive into the news. And I don't know if you've heard, don't know if you've been asleep for the past 72 hours, but a lot of huge game-changing news happened and has continued to happen today, so we gotta talk about it. So how about you just hit that like button to let YouTube know you like these big daily dives into the news, and I'm just gonna jump into it.
This is a news show.
So this first part, you know already, but it has to be said to get to the big news today. Right, President Biden announced that he was dropping out of the presidential race yesterday, writing, "It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president, and while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as the president for the remainder of my term." With him going on to say that he'll further address the nation later this week, as well as pointing to his record as president. With him then ending with, "I believe today what I always have, that there is nothing America can't do when we do it together. We just have to remember we are the United States of America." But from there, we'll start with some things that we have learned since the announcement. One, turns out Joe's just like me. His staff didn't know this was happening until 1 minute before it was sent out. With reportedly only a close circle of family and advisors knowing what was going to happen as they talked over the situation with Biden on Sunday as he spent time at his vacation home in Delaware sick with COVID. Then also, following this announcement, you had a lot of people going, okay, well, who's running? Well, there we saw Biden quickly endorse Harris, and their campaign shifted gears to go all in on Harris. Things like the Twitter account Biden HQ switching to Kamala HQ, with that account also more than doubling in followers overnight. Also, as far as big numbers, it coincided with a ton of fundraising, with the Democratic Party getting over $100 million in donations over the past 24 hours, the largest single day since 2020, and Dem-aligned super PAC scoring $150 million. Also, speaking of money, there was a lot at play here regarding money that Biden had already raised, because an absolutely huge thing for Harris is that she can get full access to the money that was raised since she was part of the campaign, and it's the same committee, right? Because if that wasn't the case, then the campaign could either refund the donors, give it to the Democratic Party, or fund a super PAC. And while right now it definitely seems like Harris is gonna get the nomination, it's not a done deal, right? Yes, she got Biden's endorsement. Endorsements have just been rolling in, but technically there's actually a month before the party gets together to make that decision. And even Harris herself has acknowledged that, tweeting, "I am honored to have the president's endorsement, and my intention is to earn and win this nomination." Now that said, whether someone's actually gonna attempt to challenge her, that remains to be seen. Right, a lot of people whose names were being thrown out there as possible replacements for Joe Biden, like Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, and Buttigieg, were quickly endorsing Harris. But also, we quickly saw rumors that former Dems like West Virginia's Joe Manchin are considering returning to the party to run. Though again, a lot of lawmakers and officials have already started to back Harris. And, you know, if there is a challenger at the convention, it'll be up to the party to decide what happens from there. And in the case of the Democrats, they have a two-tier system with pledged delegates and so-called super delegates. Right, the first are chosen based on the results of the primaries, and the latter are elected lawmakers, activists, and major party donors. Now, notably here, Biden has a ton of pledged delegates, considering that he absolutely smashed the primaries, but he's now out. And there's actually no formal rules for transferring delegates from a former candidate to another. Really, the closest thing there is Rule 13J, which states that delegates elected to the National Convention pledged to a presidential candidate shall in all good conscience reflect the sentiments of those who elected them. And there, you know, it could be argued that since Harris was on Biden's ticket, then his delegates should just vote for her, since voters kind of already knew the situation when they chose Biden. Because as often as people ignore the Veep, it's always a possibility that they will become president. Especially because before Joe Biden stepped down, both presidential candidates were born before broadcast TV was fucking color. And that's, of course, in addition to the other general dangers of this job. Also, speaking of Veeps, there's a lot of talk about who Harris is going to have as her running mate. And there, you know, we've kind of just seen a lot of people joking that it just has to be some white guy. But they're seeing, you know, a number of names getting thrown out there, though. A lot of people have kind of joked that it should just be a white guy from a swing state, which, wouldn't you know it, just so happens to kind of line up with a number of potential hopefuls that experts have pointed out. Folks like Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, for example. Others highlighting Arizona Senator Mark Kelly. Also, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear has been mentioned. You know, he's interesting. He's a Democrat that won Kentucky, which is a deeply red state, by 5 points. There are also names that have gotten thrown out there that I don't think make sense, like Newsom as a VP pick for Harris. I either don't think makes sense. However, you know, in reality, we have no idea how this is going to play out. We're going to have to watch what happens in the coming days and weeks as we get closer to the convention on August 19th. But regardless of who wins the nomination and who their VP is, we know that they're going to face some issues when it comes to ballots. Right? And that's because the Heritage Foundation vowed to fight any attempts to replace Biden on various ballots even before his official resignation. With the most notable of these ballots being Nevada, Wisconsin, and Georgia, all key swing states that have strict rules about replacing a candidate. And while they generally allow replacements in the event of a candidate dying or being removed from office, the foundation's general argument is that since Biden overwhelmingly won the primary in those states, he was also chosen to be the candidate. Therefore, they say that state law applies and that he can't just be taken off the ballot. And on top of that, the foundation claims that the deadline to get on those ballots has already passed. But there are a ton of major issues with what they're saying. Right? The first thing is that it's just flat out untrue that the deadline has passed. In fact, every state but Ohio has deadlines that are after the Democratic primary. Also, Ohio's was before, but the legislature passed a law that would extend it to September 1st. However, the DNC also pointed out that the law doesn't go into effect until August 31st, after the deadline and the convention. So instead of trusting the legislature, they're going to go through with their original plan to nominate someone remotely before the original August 7th deadline. Right? And then there's the issue about Biden winning the primaries. Right? The conservative argument is that Biden won the election, therefore he's the candidate, so those state laws apply. With one Fox News contributor saying, elections are not run by the party, they're not run by the federal government, they're administered by states. Each state has state law. Once you go through the primary, once you go through the caucus, you have to follow that law. But who gets to vote in primary elections and the rules about what delegates must do is completely outside of the state's authority. And in the case of the DNC, the primaries are technically advisory and the delegates are only supposed to try, quote, to reflect the sentiments of those who elected them. But they're free to do whatever they want, and they have been since 1984, which notably is different from the RNC, which is maybe why there's confusion. But the states, they can't dictate things, and the Supreme Court ruled in the 80s that the parties have widespread protections from state laws and how they choose their candidates. But the biggest hurdle the Heritage Foundation is going to have in any lawsuit is that they lack standing. Right? And to better explain it, here's how Legal Eagle put in a video discussing this exact issue.
So you can bet the Democratic Party would argue that it alone has the power to nominate its presidential candidate, and that no outsider has standing to challenge that.
Right, and he's not just some random YouTuber yapping. He's backed up by a ton of legal scholars who all agree that these efforts to block Biden's removal from ballots, they're just not going to get anywhere. However, even if there's no real legal argument, the legal aspects of all this, what we have seen are many conservatives jumping at the opportunity to try and make the Democratic Party look undemocratic. Right, and so far we've especially seen this on Twitter, where there have been widespread claims that Biden was forced out and people calling it a coup. The likes of libs of TikTok writing, the people who called us a threat to democracy for years just ran a coup against the sitting president. You also had folks like House Speaker Mike Johnson writing, at this unprecedented juncture in American history, we must be clear about what just happened. The Democrat Party forced the Democratic nominee off the ballot just over 100 days before the election, having invalidated the votes of more than 14 million Americans who selected Joe Biden to be the Democratic nominee for president. The self-proclaimed party of democracy has proven exactly the opposite. While there was no shortage of accounts parroting those claims, there was also a ton of pushback. Simple, unassailable facts. What happened today was not a coup. January 6th was literally an attempted coup, and anyone who says otherwise is either a moron or a bad faith actor. You also had folks like an associate professor at the University College of London writing, actual coup expert here, a president deciding not to run for re-election according to democratic rules isn't in fact a coup. By contrast, an incumbent trying to steal an election after losing by telling officials to find more votes and inciting a violent attack is an auto coup. With many also noting that many of the Republicans calling this a coup were also demanding that Biden step down. Right? And in particular, they've pushed this talking point that Biden stepped down because of his allegedly declining mental capabilities and health. With even House Speaker Johnson suggesting this, saying, if Joe Biden is not fit to run for president, he is not fit to serve as president. He must resign the office immediately. November 5th cannot arrive soon enough. Though again, and this is a key thing, nowhere has it been stated from Biden or his team that he was stepping aside for any of the reasons that people have been saying. But there's a big difference between dropping out, not taking your party's nomination because the polling says that your base is very concerned about your age and that it seems like you're just not going to win, and being capable of doing the job of president. But it's pretty much anyone that is familiar with politics and running for office will tell you there is a massive difference between being a candidate and being the president, between running for the job and doing the job. Though I've also seen a few people saying that Biden should resign because Harris would then be president and that would technically make her number 47 and it would fuck with Trump's merch. But I don't see that happening in the near future for whatever reason. And as far as, the Democrats in this situation are concerned, most have said that Biden's decision has just come off as selfless and has received widespread praise. But as far as what happens from here, we are largely in uncharted territory. That said, there will likely be a bunch of legal challenges thrown around, so fun. It's also incredibly likely that Harris is going to be the nominee, though again, this election has showed us we never really know what's around the corner. And who really knows what's going to happen from here to August 19th when the Democratic convention kicks off. And so in the meantime, I'll just say hi to all the history students that are going to be learning about this in 30 years. Is it crazier or have things mellowed out? Also, do you even exist? Because honestly, the way things feel right now, that might be a win. And of course, just as I was wrapping up today's show, more news dropped. It is definitely looking like Harris is going to be the nominee, as she's already secured many of the delegates that she needs for the nomination, if not more than enough. And then, so I want to clear up some confusion surrounding our longtime partner, Copilot, which is now Trainwell. Because see, Copilot, they changed their name to Trainwell to clearly differentiate themselves from the growing number of AI chatbot Copilot services. And this new name, it underscores their commitment to human-led personal training, right? Emphasizing the irreplaceable value of genuine human connection and the expertise of their outstanding trainers. And I can attest to this because my workouts with my trainer and through the app are still what I use and work for me. Though, not just me, right? Do you prefer the gym, home workouts? Do you travel a lot? Trainwell has you covered. And they're ranked highest out of the best personal trainer apps of 2023 by Forbes. You know, it's nice. My trainer tweaks my workouts to match whichever new goal I've set for myself. You know, I've gotten to a place that I'm really happy recently, but I've also in the past week started a new weight training journey. You know, I'm wanting to build up more and more strength, especially because, you know, I'm not getting any younger. But whether it be like this recent change or really the whole journey, small changes that you make today can enhance your life in ways you never thought possible. And here, the first step's easy. You start with an onboarding call, connect with your trainer, and they make customized workouts tailored to your needs. And without a doubt, like where I am today, Trainwell helped me. And so if you want to join me on a fitness journey of your own, click the link in the description or just scan that QR code. And the first 100 people to sign up with my Trainwell, formerly Copilot link, get 14 days free plus $25 off on their first month. And then the director of the Secret Service got absolutely reamed by Congress today. And I mean, as I'm recording this, it's not even done yet. You know, we saw Director Kimberly Cheatle appear before the House Oversight Committee to testify about the security failures around the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. And while these days you rarely see Republicans and Democrats coming together to agree on anything, the bipartisan disdain for this woman has been wild. Right? Especially because instead of providing clarity or really any substantial new information, Cheatle has deeply pissed off members of both sides of the aisle, with her often refusing to answer many of their questions, often citing continuing investigations and the need for more information, saying that she expects to have better answers within 60 days when a report will be finalized. But with that, you had many lawmakers hitting back, arguing that she needs to provide answers now. But this including the likes of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who noted that the proximity to the election makes the timeliness here even more important.
This is about the safety of some of the most highly targeted and valued targets internationally and domestically in the United States of America. So the idea that a report will be finalized in 60 days, let alone prior to any actionable decisions that would be made, is simply not acceptable. The violence that could break out in this political moment, regardless of party, in the event of someone getting hurt, constitutes a national security threat to the entire country.
And again, while this is still happening, I want to hit on some of the highlights. Right, first off, we saw Cheatle again taking responsibility, saying in her opening statement,
"The assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump on July 13th is the most significant operational failure of the Secret Service in decades, and I am keeping him and his family in my thoughts. I take full responsibility for any security lapse of our agency."
But then, once she had to start answering questions, everything just devolved, right? You had lawmakers pressing Cheatle on the breakdown in protection, asking questions about why the roof the shooter fired from wasn't secured, and specifically there, why the building he used wasn't included in the Secret Service's security perimeter zone, even though it was just 200 yards away from the president.
The individual used an AR-15 in order to act out his assassination attempt. An AR-15 has a range of about 400 to 600 yards. My question is, why is the Secret Service protective perimeter shorter than one of the most popular semi-automatic weapons in the United States?
There are a number of weapons out there with a number of ranges. Again, an advance was completed. The determination of the perimeter, I'm not going to speak to specifics, but there are a number of factors that are taken into account when we determine our perimeter. Some of it has to do with terrain, some of it has to do with buildings, some of it has to do with assets and resources that are available.
And so what I'm hearing is that a perimeter was not established outdoors in an outdoor venue that would prevent an AR-15, which is one of the most common weapons used in mass shootings, from being able to be within the range of Secret Service protection.
But Cheatle, we saw her give very few answers despite repeated pressing. You know, at one point she said that the rooftop in question was under overwatch, meaning that it was being monitored by law enforcement. But then she also evaded questions about why no Secret Service agents were placed on the roof.
We are still looking into the advance process and the decisions that were made.
Okay.
Beyond that, the director has failed to clarify which agency was responsible for watching the building. But I mean, last week, she told reporters that state and local law enforcement officials were responsible for the area outside the perimeter, but all those agencies have disputed her account, which has also raised some serious questions about the communication issues between various enforcement agencies. Questions that, again, Cheatle failed to answer during the hearing. Also, on the note of communication issues, Cheatle was pressed extensively on why Trump was allowed on stage, despite the fact that officials had flagged the shooter as suspicious multiple times prior to the shooting. But they're saying there there that the figure had been seen by law enforcement with a rangefinder before the shooting, but saying they didn't consider him an immediate threat because a rangefinder isn't considered a weapon or prohibited item at events like rallies. But then also, rather than providing answers on how this breakdown occurred, she repeatedly said she didn't know the timeline and was waiting for more information. There was also a big focus on whether the Secret Service denied requests from Trump's security detail for more manpower and federal resources. Because last week, the agency spokesperson strongly denied the allegation, saying it was absolutely false that a member of the former president's team requested additional security resources and that those were rebuffed. With that also being echoed by DHS Secretary Mayorkas, who said that the accusation that he had issued the denials was, quote, a baseless and irresponsible statement, and it is one that is unequivocally false. But amid reports over the weekend that the Secret Service had repeatedly turned down requests for additional security from Trump's detail for most of the time since he left office, the agency spokesperson totally changed his story, acknowledging that the Secret Service had, in fact, turned down some requests, though he said it was not specifically for the Pennsylvania rally where the shooting took place. Also adding that when the Secret Service can't provide additional resources, the agency, quote, made modifications to ensure the security of the protectee, including by supplementing state and local law enforcement or changing security plans to reduce Trump's exposure. When asked by lawmakers, Cheatle said that no resources or requests were denied for the Pennsylvania rally.
For the event on July 13th, the details that were the assets that were requested for that day were given. For the event in Butler, there were no requests that were denied, but there were sufficient resources
What did you just
that
say?
were given to.
Did you just say there were
former
sufficient
presidents.
resources? President Trump
Event
got
that
shot.
day.
Someone got killed. There were not sufficient resources, clearly.
Also beyond that, other notable moments from the hearing were the numerous testy exchanges from lawmakers who weren't afraid to show their anger at Cheatle, with some escalating to pretty heated confrontations like this interaction with Representative Nancy Mace that's been circulating a lot on social media.
You're full of shit today. You're just being completely dishonest.
Also in a similar vein, we saw numerous lawmakers across the political spectrum calling for Cheatle to resign or to be fired, and sometimes very forcefully.
In my opinion, you do need to be fired immediately.
If you have an assassination attempt on a president, a former president, or a candidate, you need to resign.
You know what else is dangerous? I believe your horrifying ineptitude and your lack of skilled leadership is a disgrace. Your obfuscating today is shameful, and you should be fired immediately and go back to Garden Doritos. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
All of this also included the bizarre moment from Republican Representative Tim Burchett, who appeared to argue that the assassination attempt happened because a woman was running the Secret Service.
Ma'am, you are a DEI horror story. I've told my daughter multiple times, my wife and my daughter, we talk to her all the time about how she's going to succeed in life. She'll succeed in life by achieving. Ma'am, you have not achieved today. You've let the American public down. If it was up to me, you'd be gone.
But despite all of that, Cheatle repeatedly said that she doesn't intend to resign, and even saying at one point,
I think that I am the best person to lead the Secret Service at this time.
right, and so that's kind of the main substance and the highlights as of recording, though I'll link to the full thing down below. But in general, I feel like it's safe to say that this has been an absolute disaster nightmare for Cheatle. And given what we've seen in those clips and also the public reaction to much of it, you have people saying it's going to be hard for her to justify staying in her current role. But for now, we're going to have to, one, yes, wait to see what happens in the aftermath of this hearing, but also two, what we learned from the results of the investigations that Cheatle claims have prevented her from actually answering most of the questions. But in the meantime, I'd love to ask you, what do you think of all this? But then, shifting gears, let's talk about the controversy and the backlash against Bella Hadid and Adidas. Right, because Adidas, they recently launched their SL72 campaign, which is supposed to celebrate the anniversary of the 1972 Munich Olympics and the revival of their classic sneaker from the 70s. And Bella Hadid, she was supposed to be the face of this campaign, right? And they posted several shots of Bella holding the shoes and wearing them. But that decision now has the company facing serious criticism and possibly even legal action. See, during the 1972 Olympics in Munich, 8 men from the Palestinian group Black September got into the Olympic Village with rifles and grenades. And they did this with the goal of holding the Israeli athletes hostage and demanding the release of more than 200 prisoners. And during the first part of this, they killed 2 members of the Israeli Olympic team and they took 9 more hostage. And then during a rescue attempt, all 9 hostages were killed along with a West German police officer. And so one, you have people saying, Adidas' decision to call back to these particular Olympics in light of the current war in Gaza, it's not the smartest move. But then also, two, you have some even more furious with the company's decision to star Bella Hadid in the campaign, with people noting that she is half Palestinian herself and she has frequently used her fame to support Palestine and criticize the Israeli government. With even the likes of the American Jewish Committee saying on Twitter, for Adidas to pick a vocal anti-Israel model to recall this dark Olympics is either a massive oversight or intentionally inflammatory, and saying neither is acceptable. There was also a similar criticism shared by the state of Israel, accusing Bella of having, quote, a history of spreading anti-Semitism and calling for violence against Israelis and Jews, with us then seeing Adidas respond to all this backlash by pulling the ads and saying in a statement, we are conscious that connections have been made to tragic historical events, though these are completely unintentional, and we apologize for any upset or distress caused. As a result, we are revising the remainder of the campaign. We believe in sport as a unifying force around the world, and will continue our efforts to champion diversity and equality in everything we do. But then with that, as far as on the other side of this, while we don't have a statement from Bella yet, she did reportedly remove a photo she posted of her posing with the ad in Times Square for her Instagram. You also had TMZ reporting that Bella had retained lawyers to take action against Adidas, according to sources. With those sources also reportedly saying that Bella's upset that the company would put out a campaign associating anyone with the 1972 Munich Olympics tragedy. And notably, while there's been backlash against Adidas and Bella, there are also a lot of people in Bella's corner, with there being no shortage of popular posts saying things like, Bella Hadid, your humanity lost to brand, but you gained double the love and support. It's time to give Adidas the Starbucks treatment. But for now, we're gonna have to wait to see how this plays out. And then, this is gonna sound made up. Two cows have accidentally kicked off a culture war that has engulfed New York State. Right, so their names are Blackie and Horny for their black hair and horns, respectively. And 2 summers ago, they escaped from their farm in the rural town of New Fane in western New York, with them then wandering into a neighbor's property a quarter mile away. But the thing is, that property, it wasn't just another farm. It's an animal sanctuary that protects cattle from slaughter. And its owner is Tracy Murphy, a socially conscious vegan who actually started the venture several years prior. Right, and so you can probably see where this is going. She finds the cows in her yard the next morning, she herds them into a pen, and immediately calls animal control, with an investigator coming over a week later to check on the cows, then interviewing her neighbors and learning that Scott Gregson is missing 2 cows. So Gregson, he talks to Murphy and he's like, hey, I'll swing by after the weekend to pick them up. So when that happens, right, when Gregson shows up, being a state trooper himself, he brings a fellow trooper with him, as well as the animal control agent and his family members. But when he asks for his cows back, Murphy refuses, right? Because in her mind, she can't just willingly send these living, sentient beings to their death.
Well, I'll come grab the animals. And then
no, you're not coming to get the animals unless you have a warrant.
No, but you have my property.
I have a lien on these animals. They wandered onto my property.
And before even beginning to negotiate, she demands proof of ownership from Gregson. And Gregson claims to have receipts, which he would then eventually show to the police, but Murphy also demands that he pay $2,500 to settle the lien that she claimed on the cows and reimburse the sanctuary for 9 days worth of hay, straw, and care. But also saying if he doesn't like that, he can sell Blackie and Horny to the sanctuary, who also, now by the way, she is calling Little Willow and Ishmael. And so what we see there is one very frustrated Gregson giving up and driving back to his farm. But all that, it was really just the beginning of this whole saga, because he's got buddies in law enforcement, so Murphy's afraid that they're gonna seize the cows from her, with her then ringing the alarm on Facebook Live.
Start tagging everybody that you can on this live video to let them know that law enforcement is violating my civil rights.
With her then in another post putting out Gregson's home address and telephone number, which is when things really start to go off the rails. Because according to the district attorney, Gregson starts getting phone messages at his house threatening to rape and kill his children. So the war was just on, someone then doxing Murphy in return, with her receiving threatening voice messages, emails, and comments on Facebook calling for her to be lynched. But then also pretty much the entire town lined up against her, since she's basically the only vegan sanctuary in a sea of farmers and ranchers. And so pretty quick, people start showing up outside her property with signs reading stuff like not show cows or commandments not to steal and covet your neighbor's property, with a parade of cars, trucks, tractors, and motorcycles driving back and forth, blaring their horns. Also featuring a man in a cow costume leaning out of his sunroof and pumping his fists. You also had some guys taunting her by grilling steaks, according to court documents. And lastly, with this, you had someone on a motorcycle doing donuts in her yard, tearing up patches of lawn. But then, a couple days later, Gregson's buddies finally arriving, with 5 state troopers bringing a search warrant, arresting Murphy and letting a neighbor take the cows back to Gregson's farm.
There they are, going home where they belong.
Going home where they belong.
And with all this, we saw Murphy charged with 3rd-degree larceny, which is a felony punishable by up to 7 years in prison. And this is the judge also imposed a gag order that barred her from posting any content on any subject on any social media platform. And all the while, Blackie and Horny, or Little Willow and Ishmael, depending on which side you're on, they were sold and slaughtered shortly afterward, which could have been the end of this story, but still we are not done. Because at this point, of all people, Joaquin Phoenix catches wind of all this, and he's like, hold up. Because apparently he is a staunch vegan, and somehow he heard that the cows were named Joaquin and Phoenix, which of course, is not true, but either way, he puts out a statement to local newspapers saying, to so harshly punish a woman who is simply showing kindness to 2 individuals who had wandered onto her property is astounding. And there's just this mishmash of thing after thing that happened. We see several of Gregson's supporters drive to the home of one of the sanctuary's board members who claims to have nothing to do with the dispute.
Attention Youngstown, attention Youngstown. I'm sorry if I disrupt your dinner that was provided by farmers while I'm here fighting for the rights of farmers. This is a corporate policy to dox and harass farmers for trying to retrieve their livestock.
We also see activists for the open rescue movement, which enters corporate farms to free suffering animals and document the harsh conditions, inviting Murphy to a summit in Buffalo, by which time, it's been almost a year since her arrest. She's out of jail. But then you have a local resident criticizing the event's attendees. 50 chickens then go missing from her farm just 2 days later. Also, that same week, another farmer chases 2 trespassers off his farm after he spotted them filming his livestock. And so at this point, you have people scared, they feel unsafe on their own property, which is when Rob Ort comes in. And he's the New York Senate Republican minority leader, and he holds a news conference at the farm that was trespassed on. And there, he made what many perceive to be a veiled threat against open rescue advocates.
You are not welcome on these farms. I don't care how passionate you are about your cause. I'm just as passionate about upholding the rule of law here in New York State and in Niagara County. And the Second Amendment exists to protect person and property. And I would remind these advocates of that fact.
With him also reportedly working on legislation to increase criminal penalties against farm trespassers. And all this is now Murphy's charge has been reduced to a misdemeanor, though she still faces up to a year in jail, with her trial scheduled to start in October. And then, while the US news cycle is going wild right now, it is important to remember that there's huge international news. And with that, we gotta talk about how the situation with Israel and the Houthis is going from bad to worse. Because along with Hamas and Hezbollah, the Houthis are an Iran-backed anti-Israel militant group in the region. And for a decade, they've been one main side in Yemen's civil war. But since October 7th, the reason that they've been in the headlines is because they've been attacking ships in the Red Sea. With that, majorly disrupting global shipping, affecting at least 65 countries and major energy and shipping companies. And while the US and allies have responded to those attacks by carrying out strikes on Houthi targets in Yemen, Israel hasn't actually taken part. But in any case, a key thing is that besides ships, the Houthis have also directly targeted Israeli civilians and civilian infrastructure. And according to a spokesman from the Israeli army, they've done this about 200 times. But also with that, most of those launches were intercepted by the US or Israel's own defenses. That is until this last Friday, because that is when a Houthi-fired drone made its way through the defenses and struck Tel Aviv, with it specifically hitting an apartment building near the US Embassy branch office, killing at least 1 person and wounding 8 others. And this notably marking the first time that this major Israeli city has been struck by a drone in an attack claimed by the Houthis. With that, then leading to another first. Because the next day, Israel launched strikes against Houthi targets. With that being the first time Israel is struck inside Yemen, with officials claiming the attack killed at least 6 people and injured many more. Now the strikes, they targeted a port on Yemen's west coast, with Netanyahu claiming the port was being used by Iran to bring arms into Yemen, and specifically saying, the port we attacked is not an innocent port. It was used for military purposes. It was used as an entry point for deadly weapons supplied to the Houthis by Iran. However, you also have a Houthi spokesperson saying the strikes also hit civilian targets in a power station. And that spokesperson also actually describing the situation as open war. And while seemingly, in reality, we are not there yet, that is a concern, because a lot of what we've been seeing appear to be continued escalations to a possible wider war. And to that point, we've already seen the Houthis attempt another attack, with Israel actually saying they intercepted a missile fired by the Houthis at one of its own port cities. And with all this, I should say that Hezbollah in Lebanon is still considered the bigger threat given its arsenal and proximity to Israel. But importantly, any escalation between Israel and one of these Iran-backed militant groups is something that's seen as destabilizing, and is something that could potentially push the 2 countries closer towards open war. And this is, escalation is what we're seeing on other fronts. Last week, for example, we had the leader of Hezbollah threatening to target new areas in Israel if the military doesn't stop striking civilians in southern Lebanon. And then, of course, the situation in Gaza doesn't seem to be getting any better. With this most recently seeing today Israel ordering a new evacuation of an area that it previously called a safe zone, with Israel saying that it's planning an operation against Hamas militants who have used the area to launch rockets towards Israel. Also, the timing of everything, very interesting right now. Because as all of this is happening, we actually have Netanyahu set to address Congress in a couple of days. There are a lot of questions about if and what's going to come from that. Right? And that for a number of reasons, including, is he going to say anything about Harris? Or because we have some speculating, is Harris's position going to be different from Biden's? Also, is she going to be more willing to criticize Netanyahu than Biden? And while, of course, I'd love to know your thoughts on this, for now, we're going to have to wait to see what happens. But that, my friends, is where today's Monday evening, Tuesday morning dive into the news is going to end. We can already tell tomorrow's show is going to have to be even bigger, and there's going to be more to talk about. So you won't have to miss my dumb face for long, because remember, my name's Philip DeFranco. You've just been filled in. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.